Hi, everyone. Special guest with us today. We have Lisa Dion, who is a local person here in Colorado that I happen to know from another part of life. And she is an international teacher who works with Synergetic Play Therapy and is the founder and president of the Synergetic Play Therapy Institute. She hosts lessons on a podcast about things that happen in the playroom with play therapy and has received a number of awards and spoken all over the world with facilitation and working with individuals and organizations in addition to a play therapy specialty. So Lisa has offered generously to give us some information today that might be helpful as we all try to navigate sort of this crazy COVID-19 time and changing routines, and how that might how we might learn some things about what she does in her everyday work that could be really helpful to all of us right now. So Lisa, thanks for being a part of this, and I'll leave it to you to get us started.
Thank you, Cindy, so much. So as you mentioned, in my daily work, I do a lot of teaching and training regarding what we call synergetic play therapy. And the piece that I'm going to draw from that for our conversation today is, so for those of you that are not familiar with what play therapy is, it's a form of counseling for children, in a sense. So we use play just like we would use a conversation with adult. However, the lens that I use is through looking at children through the lens of a nervous system activation. So we look at how well is a child regulated in their physiology or not. So the relevance of that and what I teach there for now is that we all have a nervous system. And right now our nervous systems are all very much reacting and responding to all of the perceived threats and challenges that are going on right now with the coronavirus. And so I want to spend a little bit of time just, first of all, normalizing what's going on for us and giving us a bit of a foundation that we can just stand on. Right now, there's so much happening that most of us, to some degree, are feeling a bit off kilter. Some of us are actually feeling like we've actually lost ourselves, don't really know where to orient, how to orient. So I want to start with just where are we, and ground ourselves in our own internal experience. And then I want to talk a bit about what can we actually be doing right now within our own physiology, so that we can actually set ourselves up so that as this continues, we don't start to feel greater and greater effects of the stress that we're carrying. And we set ourselves up so that we're not hitting high levels of burnout. And then we have our own issues down the road with health and our own well-being because we've been walking around with our cortisol levels and our stress levels, through the roof. So my intention for our conversation is to offer some relief, to offer some support, some grounding, some normalization, and then also what can you do very simply right now to actually help yourself feel connected and grounded so you can actually better respond instead of just react through this whole process, which has huge effects on our immune system and our physiology. So I think that would be a great place to start.
I think that sounds great. I think we all could use any of those guidances that you have to offer. That's terrific. Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's just start with normalizing this whole experience. So our brains are designed to react when we perceive some type of a threat or a challenge. And I think that we can all agree right now that we're all perceiving threats and challenges with the coronavirus. And when we are reacting, basically it's our body saying, I'm going to take the challenge on. I want to do something about this. We're going to try to keep ourselves safe. And our bodies respond in one of two ways. So for many of us, the response is, or the reaction is a bit of an escalation. So it may look and feel like anxiety, panic, even aggression, high levels of intensity, overwhelm, irritability, high levels of activation, which is your fight or flight response. And then we also have another way of responding, which actually looks and feels a bit more like collapsing and shutting down and withdrawing and going numb and checking out and just not even actually being able to feel what's going on. And that is our other way that we are responding right now. Both of those are healthy, brilliant ways that we were designed to respond to stress and to respond to challenges at hand. So I think that's the first thing for all of us just to recognize, is that whatever is happening inside of us, whatever's happening inside of you, it's normal. It's so incredibly normal. And your body's doing exactly what it was designed to do with the particular perceptions that you have. And I think that's helpful, because some of this feels really strange and crazy and all of this. I think the other point with that is that everybody's bodies are responding according to their perception of the level of threat or challenge that they're perceiving, which means that nobody right now is having a reaction that's wrong. And I think that's also really important, because sometimes we can start judging people's reactions and how they're handling this. And the reality is everybody right now is doing the best they can, and their bodies are doing what their bodies were designed to do. Again, based on the particular perceptions they have and the level of threat that they are experiencing. So I think that's just a place just to start, that you are normal, right? We're having normal responses. Now, within our normal response, again, I said that these responses that we're having, sometimes it's a bit of a rev up, and other times it's a bit of a collapse. It's also not static. So part of what feels crazy is that one day we may feel like we are in an escalated panic response, and then the next day we feel like, I feel depressed and I can't get out of bed and I want to put my head under the covers. And then the next day, maybe you're back to feeling anxious again. Or maybe in the morning you're feeling anxious, and by the afternoon you're like, it's too much, I just can't handle it, and you start to shut down. So it's not just that we're having activation, it's that the activation is all over the place. It's all over the place, and it's not actually very predictable right now, which can also feel really challenging and really, I don't know if decentering, I don't know if that's a word, but we'll go with that for now. But it can feel very decentering. So where we feel like we're losing ourselves. We can't quite grab a hold of ourselves because things are moving and spinning so quickly. So again, all of this super, super normal. The challenge with this is that when we are in this heightened state of activation, or we're in this reaction, we are releasing quite a bit of chemicals through our system in order to respond. And what that means is that we have a heightened experience of stress in our physiology. And over time, that can impact us, not necessarily in a positive way. So if we have, for example, high levels of cortisol and adrenaline just pumping through our system over extended periods of time, it is going to affect our immune system. It is going to affect our own overall health and well-being. It's going to affect our relationships. If nothing else, our relationship with ourselves. It sets us up down the road for really feeling overly exhausted and starting to really shut down and really check out, leading to larger states of depression. It sets us up so we're more susceptible to addictive patterns, all these types of things. So I think the tricky thing for us to recognize and balance is that we're having a normal response. And this normal response wasn't designed to be extended for long periods of time. It was designed to help us be able to mobilize in any given moment. But it wasn't designed to, our bodies aren't designed to sustain within a stress response for an extended period of time. So we actually have to intervene. And I think that's part of what this conversation is about, is what do we do with this? There's so much out there right now about the practicalities of how we can engage in self-care. So getting great sleep, eating well, you know, even the basic things around, you know, washing your hands. And if you are going to be around someone, make sure it's, you know, 6 feet apart, and all this, the social distancing and all that. And all of that is helpful, and it's designed to keep our system in check, so to speak, and to keep us as healthy as possible. But it doesn't speak to our mental health. And it doesn't speak to what's happening, again, inside of our physiology and in the activation. So what we're going to get into here, for me, feels just as important as all of that. So when we start talking about how do you actually regulate through this, and how do you actually work with this, this is just as important as the eating well. It's just as important as the good night's sleep. It's important that we take what we're about to talk about and find a way to incorporate it regularly throughout our day. And what I'm going to propose are not big things like, hey, go take an hour and, you know, go do yoga or something like that. We're talking about what are different ways that we can actually stay connected to ourselves in the moment that we're experiencing the intensity. So to elaborate on that a little bit more, when we are having a high stress response, or when we are reacting, we're not able to respond to the challenge at hand. And we're not able to engage with our prefrontal cortex, which is right now actually would be really helpful for us to be functioning from, because this is the part of our brain that actually helps us think logically, and we can actually look for solutions, and we can actually get creative in the time of a crisis, and we can plan and organize. And that really is necessary when we are in crisis. But if we can't get from here to here, then we're gonna struggle. So what we're talking about is the pathway actually up into your prefrontal cortex, and it has to do with going into the part of the nervous system that actually allows us and gives us the capacity to actually regulate. So the way that I define regulate may sound a little different than what some people talk about. People often talk about regulating as being calm. And if we're going to be really honest, right now, this idea of being calm is not actually very practical right now, because our bodies are responding. So I'm not going to tell you to be calm. What I'm going to propose, though, is that it's really important to be connected. And there's a huge difference. So for example, if I'm beginning to feel anxiety and I notice it, and then I pause and I take a really deep breath where I extend my exhalation, in that moment, I just connected with myself. And as I connected with myself, I actually gave myself the ability to actually move up into my prefrontal cortex. So the act of connecting with yourself in whatever state you're in, it's not about making it go away. It's not about trying to get rid of it. It's not about trying to stop it, because if you're not going to be able to right now. It's too intense. It's simply about, can I be in relationship with myself right now in the midst of whatever it is that I'm experiencing? So can I hang on to myself while I feel anxious? Can I connect with myself while I'm feeling overwhelmed? Can I stay connected to myself while I'm feeling incredible sadness? Can I stay connected to myself when I feel like I just want to collapse and I want to shut down? And that truly is the thing that will get us from here to here. Our ability to come back to ourselves over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. I'll share a little bit more about why this is so key. I mentioned that when we take a breath, or when we become mindful, we're engaging the part of the nervous system that gives us access to the prefrontal cortex. There is a response in our physiology that allows for relaxation and allows for us to actually open and engage. But it only happens when we have a perception of feeling safe, which is like, yeah, but we don't feel safe right now. However, when you're having a moment of anxiety and you allow yourself to take a deep breath, for a split second, you feel safe. So every time you take a breath, you're actually affirming to yourself, in this moment, I'm safe. Every time you allow yourself to, and I'm going to give some different ideas, whether it is to move or shake it out or squeeze or whatever it is, every time you do something to connect to yourself in that activation, you're literally in that moment telling yourself, see, I'm safe. See, I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still alive. There's a part of me that's okay. I'm actually safe. And when we do that, it actually allows the system for even just a split second to begin to relax. And as we begin to relax, it gives us access into higher centers of our brain, which then allow us to actually step in and have a bit more governance in the moment. So I'll just pause there. Does that make sense, Cindy, or anything you want me to elaborate on?
No, I think it does make a lot of sense. And I think the thing that stands out to me is a little bit what we talked about briefly before, was that this is not like, we don't have some sort of time frame really attached to what's going on now. You know, there's lots of ideas about time frames, but the ripple effects are going to go on for a while till it gets sorted out. So I think any things that we can be doing already in anticipation that we're not going to wake up next Wednesday, let's say, and it's all just going to be fine again, because it's not really going to work that way. So I think the longevity of the marathon, you know, makes what we can do every day and every moment right now even more important, because we don't really know how long the marathon is right now. So we can't really wait, wait to do these things until things settle down, because we don't have that. So I think it's important to have the opportunity to try some things even in the moment now that could give us a bit of relief all along the way. So I think this is great. Absolutely. And right on track to the things I've heard questions about and wonderings about from other people. Beautiful.
So let's actually go through a couple of different things that people can actually just practically do. And I'm talking about regulating in the intensity in the moment. That is what I'm talking about. We know all the other things, like, yes, keep trying to exercise and all those kinds of things. But this is like in the moment of the activation. So in the moment that you're feeling anxious, maybe you just heard some new news and you just got a major surge. Or maybe you're thinking about the loss of someone. Maybe you know someone that is sick, or maybe you know someone that's actually passed, and you're feeling the intensity of that. Maybe you're worried that your business is actually going to take a really big financial hit. Maybe your business is taking a big financial hit, and then there's the fears that are coming up around that. Maybe it's in the moment managing the stress of you're trying a new platform. You're trying to do something now virtually, and it's completely foreign to you, and you're managing the stress of that. And then you're trying to do that, and your kid is screaming in the other room, and you're now trying to balance and manage, how do I do home and work together? Whatever it may be. There's so many different moments when we feel the activation, as I had talked about at the beginning. So the first thing is simply just to notice that you're having a reaction. You notice that your body is reacting. The fastest and most important one has to do with our breathing. So when we start to become scared, our breathing patterns naturally change. And oftentimes we go into a bit of a holding pattern where we're not actually taking a full breath. So a place to start, if you're noticing that your breath is really shallow, is to take a breath in, but to actually really extend the exhalation out. So you might even think of it as you breathe in. Let's say you breathe into the count of 2. You're actually going to exhale out to the count of 4. So almost like a double the length of the exhale, as you're trying to just help the system just come back into a more regulated state. So let's actually try this. So for those of you that are watching right now, I actually want you to try this. So I want you to take a deep breath in to the count of 2. So, and then out for 4. And then in for 2. And then out for 4. Maybe even do it again on your own. So we begin to just take our breathing and balance it back into a more regulated pattern. Some people may have to play around with it. You know, the counting for some people helps, but I just want you to hear that if you're holding, initially just extend the exhalation out. It's like, let it go. You know, we're holding, 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 just let it go, let it go, let it go, right? Yes, exactly. After you do that a couple times, then you can start to move your breath into a more regulated breathing pattern. And that's where your inhalation and your exhalation are actually more of equal count. So you have more of a just a bit more regulated in the breathing. Important as you're doing this, that when you're taking breaths, that you're taking full body breaths. So I want us to imagine this. You're standing in the kitchen, you're feeling really overwhelmed. Maybe there's a bunch of family stuff going on. You're trying to manage this, you're trying to hold this or whatever. And as you're in the kitchen, even in the midst of all the activation, you just right there on the spot. You don't need to go remove yourself and find a quiet place and put on some Zen music and sit in a comfy chair and meditate for 20 minutes. This is right there on the spot. Maybe you're having a challenging conversation with someone and all of a sudden you notice that your body's contracting. So work your breathing pattern right there on the spot. It's huge. A couple other ones, and this is one of my favorite ones. It has actually to do with squeezing and pushing. So when we become really overwhelmed and we start to get really activated, there is that experience often of disconnecting from ourselves and losing ourselves. And for those of you that are feeling really disoriented right now, this one that I'm going to offer is actually really, really important to do. And this has to do with putting pressure actually on your body and putting pressure on your joints. This is called proprioceptive input. And proprioceptive input into the body actually tells your body, I'm here. Okay, I'm here. This is where I am. It's incredibly grounding. So we just did our arms. You can also squeeze your legs. You can squeeze your knees. I'm a huge fan of squeezing my head. Sometimes, you know, it's just, you know, there's a reason why instinctually when we become overwhelmed, we go, oh, and truly it's an instinctual response to actually ground ourselves because you're adding in that proprioceptive input that says, oh, okay, I'm here. I'm connected back to myself. So these kinds of things. So again, forget if you look funny. Forget if your kids are going to be like, what are you doing? Whatever it is. If you're on a work call, you can actually squeeze your hands. So right now, you don't know that I'm squeezing my hands. You don't know right now that I'm squeezing my legs. So you can actually manage your physiology and give yourself some of this proprioceptive input in a way where you don't look like you're just squeezing all over yourself. But in the moment, again, let's go back to you're standing in the kitchen. Here comes the anxiety again. Squeeze, push, lean against a wall, push on the counter, stretch, but come back actually into your body in the moment. Cindy, this is one of the things that I do, for example, when I go in and I work with classrooms with children, is this particular one that we just did is I teach teachers how to actually proactively bring in these kind of experiences at least once an hour so that the child's nervous system actually gets regulated. It can kind of come back in. I call it like hitting reset on your nervous system. But if we could imagine, if we just told ourselves, just once an hour, just push on something. That's it, for 30 seconds, and take a couple deep breaths. Even those two things that we just went, I can't tell you what a difference it will make in the day. More present, more connected, more of a sense of being able to be with the experience in our bodies instead of feeling like we have to run and hide or that this experience is just, you know, overwhelming us. Another really easy one, you take your thumb and you take your middle finger and you just push them right here. You don't have to pinch, just kind of push them right here. And then you take this finger, just like this. Super centering. Again, just little things you can do in the moment, like you're having a major wave of grief or anxiety or fear, and just center yourself. Another one is cold water. So if you, again, are feeling really activated, or this one's actually really great if you're starting to go into a bit of a shutdown response, splash cold water on your face, or get a washcloth and put the washcloth on your face, and then you get the proprioceptive and the cold. But the cooling sensation of the water actually has a relaxing effect also on the activation of the threat response in the body. Even if you go take a shower, the last part of your shower these days, just turn it to cool just a little bit, can also help regulate the nervous system. I heard once that Tony Robbins, every single morning, he goes and jumps in his pool, and he keeps his pool slightly cold. And this is actually one of his rituals to regulate his nervous system every morning, is he goes and actually submerses himself a little bit in the cold water. And it's a very similar, similar process that we're talking about. So these little things, right? These little things, breathing, pushing, centering, cold water, moving, letting ourselves, stretch our bodies, moving. If you've got to like march in place or dance, singing, humming, all of these things have a regulatory effect on our system. And again, you don't have to remove yourself from a situation to be able to do these things. These are things that you can actually do in the moment when you're starting to feel this activation. And I think I'm just gonna reiterate what we're talking about now. It really is just as important as the good night's sleep and the eating well. It's part of your own mental health, ritual process throughout the day. And it's like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, just to do quickly throughout the day, where you're hitting reset on your nervous system, just throughout the day, checking in, hitting reset, hitting reset, hitting reset, hitting reset, which is so different. I'll give the counter of, I feel it all day. I hold it. 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 I don't actively regulate through it. I don't stay connected to myself through it. And it just builds up, and it builds up, and it builds up, and it builds up, and the cortisol builds up, and the adrenaline builds up. And then over time, because we're human beings, our nervous systems at some point go, this is too much. And then we start to have negative effects in our physiology that sometimes, if it goes on too long, can actually result in more challenging experiences on the other side. So that's what I wanted to share, is how do we just connect to ourselves in the moment? It's not about being calm right now. It's just about how do we stay connected in the midst of all of the activation and the intensity, because that's how we get through it. One moment to one moment to one moment right now.
Absolutely. And I so appreciate the small things that can be done all throughout the day, because I do think there's such an influx of information and change and all of that separating out or doing something big and elaborate can just feel overwhelming in and of itself, some other thing that feels overwhelming. So I appreciate all the small things we can do throughout to minimize negative impact over some amount of time. We don't know what this is going to look like. So I think this has been really great and very helpful. And I've been practicing while you've been talking about it. I've been practicing myself. So I feel all much more relaxed as I head into the rest of the day.
Beautiful.
Any last words for?
Um, what last words? I think, yeah, I will. I'll say one other piece that I think is relevant to what we're talking about. When we have these high levels of stress and we get scared, the natural impulse is to actually look outside of ourselves for safety. So we actually look at the news, hoping that we'll hear something that will help us feel better. We scroll on Facebook, searching for something that will help us feel safe, whether it's that post from a friend or that little, tip or whatever. But just for us to be aware of how much we're looking outside of ourselves right now for safety, because we feel so unsafe inside. And the irony or the paradox is that actually the sense of safety isn't out there. It's in here. So going back to what we talked about, every time you do one of the things that we just talked about, you're actually affirming your own safety to yourself. And that in the moment you do have control over, but you don't actually have control over anything that's happening out there. So the more you can orient in, the more you actually cultivate a true sense of safety that actually allows you to be in the chaos in a way where your head is still very much above water. So it's about turning back this way instead of staying oriented that way for now.
I think that is a great final thing to remind people of, because it's really not out there and we have so little control over that, whatever that is, that any things we can do in the meantime could be the most helpful. So
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I'm so
Thanks,
grateful
Cindy.
that you came, and
Yeah.
hopefully we'll get to talk again sometime.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Thank you.